It's 2025. And yet, so many women over 60 are still walking out of the salon with the same old bob one that doesn't really suit them but feels safe. The issue isn't your age. It's not your face shape. It's the handful of quiet little myths that have followed this haircut for decades. They're rarely questioned because they sound reasonable, familiar, even flattering. But when you sit down, ask for something simple, and leave with a cut that flattens your cheeks or pulls everything downward, that's not simplicity. That's a myth doing its job a little too well. In this video, we're walking through the 5 bob haircut myths that still trip up even the most stylish women over 60. And more importantly, we'll show you what to ask for instead if you want a cut that lifts, shapes, and highlights the features you still love most. No gimmicks, no trends you'll regret in a week. Just the real reasons why your current bob might be dragging your look down and the subtle shifts that can change everything. Sometimes, what we call classic is just a habit that hasn't been challenged. And if something here feels familiar or even a little freeing, tap like or send this to someone who's overdue for a refresh. Because myth number 3, that one's the trickiest of all, and it's fooled almost everyone. Let's take a look. Let's start with the myth that feels the most familiar, the idea that the bob is the safe haircut for women over 60. It sounds harmless, right? Clean lines, easy to manage, not too short, not too long. But safe can quietly turn into stuck. What often happens is this. You walk into the salon thinking, I just want something that works. So you end up with the same rounded bob you've had for the last 20 years, slightly tucked under, maybe with a bit of fringe. It's fine, it's tidy, but it doesn't say much about you today. Here's the thing. A truly flattering bob should move. It should lift your features, skim your jawline just right, and have that softness that feels effortless, not sculpted within an inch of its life. Picture this instead. A bob with gentle texture through the ends, maybe even a few airy layers. The kind that catches the light when you turn your head. It frames your face without boxing it in. And it doesn't just sit there, it has presence. If your current bob feels more like a habit than a hairstyle, it might be time to rethink what safe really means. Because safe shouldn't mean dated. And it definitely shouldn't mean invisible. Your haircut should reflect who you are now, confident, modern, and fully in charge of what stays and what goes. And here's the quiet part most people miss. Sometimes it's not the haircut itself, it's the shape we've been told to stay inside. And that shape often starts and ends right at the chin. Let's move to one of the most persistent beliefs, one that sounds technical, but quietly limits your whole look. This one's surprisingly common, the idea that if it's not cut right at the chin, it's not really a bob. But here's the truth. That one-length chin-hugging shape isn't a rule. It's just one version. And for many women over 60, it's not even the most flattering one. As we age, our faces change, fullness shifts, the jawline softens. The neck becomes more visible. So why lock yourself into a shape that stops right at the widest part of the face? Now picture this, a long bob or lob that grazes the collarbone. It draws the eye downward just slightly, elongating the neck. It gives your features room to breathe. And it has that soft, graceful movement every time you turn your head. The beauty of a lob is that it still gives you all the structure of a bob, but with a little more freedom. You can tuck it behind your ears, wear it with a deep side part, or add subtle waves for lift. And if you're dealing with fine hair, that extra length actually helps create the illusion of volume, especially when paired with some interior layering or soft graduation near the ends. So if your chin-length bob has started to feel a bit boxy, maybe it's not your face that needs adjusting. Maybe it's just time to let your bob grow up a little. And if you thought length was the only outdated rule still hanging around, wait until you hear what some women are still doing at the ends. This one's everywhere. The curled under bob round at the ends, hugging the cheeks, neat as a pin. It's been the go-to anti-aging style for years. And yet, it's often the very thing that makes the face look heavier. Because when all the weight of your hair sits right at the jawline, guess where the attention goes? That perfectly tucked shape might have worked in the 90s back when we were using hot rollers and setting spray like it was a sport. But today's beauty doesn't live in stiff curves. It lives in airiness, in softness, in movement. Now imagine a bob with a little lived-in texture. The ends aren't curled under, they're a bit piecey, maybe even undone. Instead of boxing in your face, the shape opens it up. This style doesn't scream styled. It just looks like your hair naturally happens to fall in the most flattering way possible. It's breezy. It lifts the cheekbones, and it leaves room for your features to stand out. Not to mention it's easier. No more round brushing like your life depends on it. A touch of styling cream, maybe a quick twist with your fingers, and done. So if your bob has been curling under out of habit, maybe it's time to let it breathe. Sometimes, the most youthful thing you can do is loosen the edges a little. But what if you've done all that lighten the shape, soften the ends, and your hair still feels heavy? The next myth explains why that might be happening, especially if your hair is thin or silver. This one sounds logical at first. If your hair is thinning, keep it longer, it'll hide more. Or, short cuts will just make your scalp show. But here's what usually happens. That extra length drags everything downward. It makes your hair look flat, your face look tired, and suddenly you're doing more work just to make it look like you've done less. Now let's flip that. Picture a short, softly layered bob that skims just below the ears. The kind that lifts the crown, adds a little height, and reveals your neck in a way that feels elegant, not exposed. For women with natural grays or lighter strands, this kind of shape actually makes the tone pop like intentional contrast, not accidental fading. Instead of blending into your shoulders or looking washed out, your hair becomes a focal point, deliberate, polished, and full of light. And when it comes to fine or thinning hair, shorter cuts can be your secret weapon. Why? Because volume is easier to build when there's less weight pulling everything down. Add in some feathering around the crown, or a touch of stacking at the back, and suddenly your hair has shape again, even without a ton of product. So if you've been playing it safe by keeping your length, thinking it's protective, you might be missing the chance to let your features and your texture shine. Sometimes, going shorter isn't about being bold. It's about being smart. But here's the irony. Even when women do go shorter, they often end up with a cut that's way more high maintenance than it needs to be. And that leads us straight to the final myth. We've all heard this one. If you get a bob, be ready to see your stylist every 4 weeks, or it falls apart. That might have been true for the ultra-blunt, poker-straight bobs of the past. But today's bobs? They're built differently. Think of it like this. The right cut isn't just a style, it's a shape that lasts. With soft layering or a little interior graduation, a modern bob grows out gracefully. Even after 6 or 8 weeks, it still holds its structure, just a little softer around the edges. If you've ever had a bob that looked great for exactly 9 days, then suddenly felt lopsided or heavy, chances are the cut relied too much on precision and not enough on balance. Now imagine a bob that gives you options. You can wear it tucked, flipped, air-dried with a little volume spray, or smoothed out with a flat brush. No hour-long styling sessions. No panic when the roots grow in. And here's where it really matters. When your haircut works with your day, not against it. If your time and energy are going to things that matter more, your hair should be the easy part. So, no, you don't need to live at the salon to keep your bob in shape. You just need a cut that works with how your hair moves, not against it. Low maintenance isn't about doing less. It's about doing smarter and finally letting go of styles that need more from you than they give back. And if you've ever felt like your haircut takes more than it gives, the problem might not be the bob at all, but the version you've been told to settle for. So maybe the bob isn't the problem. Maybe it's the version of the bob you've been told to stick with. Because the truth is, your haircut shouldn't feel like a uniform. It shouldn't erase you or mute your personality just because it's classic. If anything, your haircut should do what good style always does. Let the best parts of you stand forward. Whether that means going shorter, adding movement, or simply asking for a shape that grows out without drama, it's all valid. And if you've been playing it safe out of habit, you're not alone. We all hold on to rules that used to serve us until they don't. So here's your gentle nudge. Next time you sit in that chair, bring one of these myths with you, not to follow, but to question. A tiny tweak might be all it takes to turn good enough into just right. Which of these myths have you believed without even realizing it? I'd love to hear what finally made things click for you in the comments. And if this helped reframe the way you see your own hair, or gave you the words to ask for what you really want, hit like, share it with someone who still thinks short equals severe, and don't forget to subscribe for more thoughtful style tailored to women who know better. Your style didn't stop evolving. Neither should your haircut.